Elijah. And Elijah is being persecuted by Ahab and his wife Jezebel. And Jezebel wants his life. He wants the life of Elijah. So Elijah flees into the wilderness. And it's so weak out there in the wilderness that the ravens have to come and feed him with cruise of oil and bread. And the angels had to feed him as well. He was just so weak from the journey. And the angels said that he had still a long journey to go. In verse 11, he's made his journey and he's now standing before the mount, before the Lord. And the Lord passed by, and a great wind rent the mountains and break in pieces the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord also was not in the earthquake. And so Elijah went, after hearing the fire and so on, the Lord not being in the fire, a still small voice. And when he heard it, he wrapped his face in a mantle, went into a cave, and behold, there came a voice unto him, and the voice said, What doest thou here, Elijah? And Elijah told the Lord he was jealous for the Lord, God of hosts. And so right up there on the mountain, God gave Elijah instruction. And once again spoke. And he asked Elijah to go forth and anoint 3 kings. That was an important announcement at that time. Put a king over Damascus, and a king over Syria, and a king over Israel. And that these 3 kings would be anointed by the prophet of God. And also to anoint a prophet to be in Elijah's room. And so that's how God worked with Elijah, right from the mountaintop. But God wasn't the only one to communicate from high places. Of course, we know there's always God's way, and then there's a counterfeit way. And after Solomon ruled over Israel and the other descendants started taking over, we know these kings, they set up high places of worship. But unfortunately, they were false places of worship. We find that in 2 Chronicles 21:5. We have one example of this, and that's Jehoram. Jehoram in 2 Chronicles 21:5, when he began to reign, in verse 11, he made high places in the mountains of Judah, and he caused the inhabitants of Jerusalem to commit fornication and compelled Judah thereto. And so Elijah had to write to him and warn him that he had not walked in the ways of his father, but had walked in the ways of the other kings of Israel and had made Jerusalem go after false gods. So they would worship these false gods also from mountaintops and from high hills and high places. A counterfeit form of worship. And they would build pyramids in other nations and these kind of things. And we know these were all places of false worship. We know Satan wants to counterfeit God and set up false worship wherever he can. And yet he uses almost the same system. See that? How he would have his false word proclaimed from these high places and come down into the descendants of the land and spoken to them. Well, Elijah told the king that God would strike his bowels in verse 18 with an incurable disease. And then the process of time, 2 years, his bowels completely fell out and he died of his illness. This was his judgment, and Israel wouldn't even burn him like they had the other kings. They obviously didn't think much of following him. And so, only 8 years did he reign over Israel. He departed without being desired. And they buried him, but not even in the sepulchre of the kings. So really not recognized. Not recognized at all.